Joining me now is Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who was grabbing the mic to speak when Mr. O'Rourke had this outburst. Dan, first of all, our deepest prayers and condolences to everyone in Texas and the people of Uvalde who are suffering so greatly tonight. We have to say that before we say anything else. What happened today at that press conference was so despicable, but from your perspective, tell us what happened.
Yeah. So when I sat down, I noticed, and we were in the large auditorium in the high school, I noticed that Beto was in the second row on the end seat. And I literally could see him leaning forward, almost like he was getting to pounce. And so but I didn't imagine. I could see maybe he was going to stand up and ask a question at some point or make a statement, but I could never imagine that on this day, when we were there to not only disseminate information and learn more, but we're there to be with these families, that he would pull such a political stunt. You know, I thought, Laura, and I said in my comments after he finally left, that can't we have just one day, 1 week, 1 month of us all coming together for these children? That's not a political stunt, not partisan politics. Where's our humanity? And what we found out is Beto O'Rourke was more interested in his political ambitions than he was about these families. And that's what I think was really the tragedy of his behavior. It showed he really didn't care about these people. And that's what we were there for. That's what Governor Abbott said, myself, and the others who spoke.
Well, he certainly couldn't have thought, Dan, that what he was doing was bringing comfort to the families, or really nothing was going to advance the narrative of safety or concern. This was first and foremost an act of political selfishness. Period.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And well planned, by the way. He came in, again, I saw him out of the corner of my eye and was wondering what he was up to. He had a right to be there, but total political selfishness. And so here we are, Laura. And this is not, by the way, what Texans expect in a leader, to behave like this, particularly in this day. He could have had a press conference outside if he wanted. He could have brought this up at some other time in some debate or some issue, but not this day. It was just offensive to these children who died and these teachers. And by the way, Laura, I found out in talking to one of the school employees, one of the teachers who was killed was found dead laying on top of a student. As I said yesterday when I was interviewed, we would hear stories about these heroic teachers and the heroism of these two teachers in that classroom and the law enforcement. Laura, I've been through a lot in Texas. We've had a lot of shootings in Texas, a lot of disasters. But whenever it's children, Laura, as you said with your own, I have children, grandchildren, it gets to the core of who we are as a country. And Laura, for him to do that today and for us to even spend 5 minutes talking about him, I just dismiss him. And I think America and Texas dismissed him today, quite frankly.
Lieutenant Governor, back to the question I asked Lieutenant Olivares about the point of entry of the school. I mean, if someone is hell-bent on maiming and destroying, they will figure out a way to do it, probably, right? But if there was, and we'll find out more, but if there was a side entrance or a back door that was open, that can't happen at any school in the country. It just can't happen. Those have to be secured, and a front door has to be the only point of entry. Yes. I mean, we've said this before, and I think you and I have talked about it before. Yeah,
we did. 4 years ago, last week, was our shooting at Santa Fe, and the day of the shooting, that was the first thing I recognized, is that our schools were not really protected the way they should be. And we put in a tremendous amount of money, over $100 million, in trying to give schools the tools to fortify their schools. It's not always as simple as you sound, but as you say, or people say, but our elementary and middle schools for sure are not that big where we can control the exit. You should have one way in, one way out. Every door should be locked. Had he, and I went up to where that door was today, I walked that area, had that door been locked, and he had taken a few more minutes to look for another entrance, he may have been stopped before getting into the school. So it's really important we do that. In our high schools, we're even going to have to think about how we redesign our high schools, because our high schools are so large, Laura, that one entrance doesn't work. But we've got to address that issue. But Laura, if I can, I just come back to this, Laura. This problem is a much larger problem than the infrastructure, the gun issue, the mental health issue. This is and all those are important. But at the end of the day, Laura, we are in a sick society where we are at each other's throats all the time. He showed it today. Everywhere you look, we are just, whether it's on the internet, whether it's in any walk of life, people are just at each other every day. And we have to ask ourselves who we are. And I believe we're a nation of godly people, and godly people need to pray for this family.
Got to make changes.
And people, we got to make changes.
Got to make changes.
2 Chronicles 7:14, Laura. Everyone should read tonight. Go to the middle of the Bible, turn right. 2 Chronicles 7:14. Christians have to pray for God to heal our land. And we have to take a stand. If there are some people in this country who are not believers, that's fine. I respect their right not to believe. But for those of us who are Christians, we need to take hold of our country, and we do that through prayer. You cannot change the culture of a country without changing the character of the people, and you just cannot change character without changing a heart, and you can't do that without turning to God. Thank you, Laura.
All right, Lieutenant Governor, great to see you tonight. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.